Paul, just making
Up at
sure
the
you
top corner.
here.
Morning, councillors. Chris, Dave.
All right, so councillors, we will open the CE Employment and Remuneration Committee meeting for the 12th of October 2023. Start with the Karakia. Would like to go through that. You want to take or you want to?
Thank you. I'll do.
Chris.
Whakataka taho ki te uru, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia makinikina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hohu, tihei, mauri ora.
Thank you very much. All right, fairly short agenda, and we do have public excluded for one item. So hopefully we can make reasonable progress on this. We do have apologies from Mikhail Downard, Councillor Downard. Any other apologies or anything you would like noted? No, I'm happy to move that. Do we have a seconder? And Councillor Hughes, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, confirmation of the agenda. Bruce, happy to move. Robbie, I'm gonna make sure I've got, no, I'm gonna make sure, Councillor Maher. All those in favor? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. And disclosures of interest, any disclosures of interest? Nope. Okay, shall move on.
Do we list those that are in the room?
They do, yes, usually in the minutes, in attendance, noted.
Thank you.
Just, Paul, so you know who's in. We've got Stu Brown, we've got Councillor Cookson, Councillor Clarkson, myself, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Marr, Councillor Smith, Councillor Dunbar Smith. And we also have Dave and Chris McClay as well, just so you know everybody that's in.
Good morning, all.
We will go to our first item, which is on page 6 of your agenda. This is the 2023 Remuneration Report. And Stu, you'll be speaking to this. Chris, did you want any introduction or?
Yeah, look, just by way is that we do updates to CERC on how our remuneration policy and how that's applied in council for your information. Paul, there's a bit of background to this. I don't know if you want to say anything there.
Only that this is one of a number of what are considered to be critical people-related policies that CERC's been taking an interest in for probably 7 or 8 years now, just to sit with the chief executive once a year and get a briefing on how the remuneration policy is working, succession planning, those sort of things. So that's just the history of this, I guess. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Paul. So this is an opportunity to, for some of you probably to understand how we apply remuneration. And the second part of it is what the idiosyncrasies were that we had to deal with last year and how that got applied. Maybe some thoughts about going forward. Stu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So it was a positive year as far as remuneration was concerned this year. You'll obviously have noted that we came back to you a second time. First of all, we got approval for a 4% increase across the organisation. Unfortunately, at that point, we hadn't got our market data. And when we got that, then we realised that we were quite a ways from that, and we came back again to council, and you graciously approved another 0.5%, which was fantastic. Beyond that, we made the decision that we still would like more, so we could actually award performance on top of the market. We had lots of discussion with the executive about that, and we agreed as an executive team that we would find another 1.1% across the organisation to be able to give performance increases as well as the market, which gave us a total of 5.8%, which was fantastic because it basically got us to only 0.5% away from the general market, which is probably one of the strongest positions we've been in years. with all of that knowledge now, I contacted Strategic Pay and said, hey, it's not really appropriate that we're receiving the market data late, and we needed to inform our decisions early. So they have put us into the September pool. So I will now be getting next year's remuneration data in 2 weeks. So we'll have that and we'll be well on for next year, which is fantastic. The difference in those two market sets is less than 0.5%. So whether we're in the September or whether in March, it won't make much difference to us, which is really good. Our Strategic Pay partnership with them is working really well through our job evaluations and moderations. That's continued to go well, and it's a really good, robust process to ensure that all of our roles are aligning with the market and have the correct data in there. I guess this year we had a really strong use and uptake in Infor to record people's goals. So around their, performance and KPIs per annum, we had 85% of the whole organization basically completed that, which is very important when you look at that extra 1.1% on performance. You want to be able to measure that, and that's how we do that using our goals. So that was really positive. Some feedback from the unions and some managers across the organisation. In the previous review of the process, we simplified it and went from a 5-tier rating scale down to a 3-tier rating scale. The feedback has been that they would like us to maybe go back to a 5-tier to give a bit more differentiation. So I'm going to look at that and bring that back to the executive and obviously yourselves if we were going to change that. But it's certainly worthwhile taking on board that feedback. So that was really the summary of the paper you've got before you. If you have any questions.
Just one, Stu. This I support the move to a September year, which gives you more accurate information, which can then go feed into the annual plan. But we are in a reasonably unique position, I suspect, at this point in time, and what you see next March may be different to what you see in September, given the rhetoric coming out of the likely people that are going to be making decisions over the next 2 or 3 months. I just wonder whether we should also use get the March data as a data point as well to consider in that plan, just to make sure that we're not getting out of line, because once you create that expectation, it's very hard to rein it back in again.
Yep, that's certainly an option for us. We can certainly get those.
The cost of putting two reports in there.
Probably another $1,500 to get that second data set, so it wouldn't be a big deal at all. So we can certainly do that, and it might come a little bit late, but it'll inform us.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Being informed is.
Just on that, if I can, even though it's kind of March reporting, it was actually really late. It wasn't until April and May. I think we got it last year at the end of year March. We found it really frustrating because we just didn't know what the market was that we had to deal with very late in the piece.
That's right.
I just see it as acting as a guide too when you're employing people, because you're then looking at current data rather than historic data.
I found reading this very informative and a good report, thanks. I just wonder whether it shouldn't be, when I say shared more widely, I know that the agendas go out, but I'm not sure that everybody who is not on a committee reads all of them. But I think certainly during the LTP process and when we're looking at the budgets going forward, this background and paper, or this paper as a background, would be helpful. So can we just work that in at the appropriate time? Because without that sort of information, I know we get applications for budget for amount of staff or pay rise or whatever, but this is the background stuff that was really helpful.
Sorry, I've got Paul online, and then I'll come to you, Ben.
Thanks, Pamela. First thing is I'd very much support getting an update of data in March. The other councils I work with, certainly if they use September data, do that, things can move quite a bit. And I think they can give you they don't have to give you position by position data. So I suspect just a general indication of what the market has moved by. So I think that's good value for money. Second thing is I absolutely support moving back to a 5-point scale rather than 3. I think 3's not granular enough if you genuinely want to have a performance pay component. So very much support that. Third point, if I could ask, Stu, would you like to explain how you calculate the gap versus market? Because I think there are some subtleties in there that it's worth people hearing. So you said that I think that you were behind market going into the last round. You're still behind market, but in total you spent 5.8%. Do you want to just explain that to folks?
Yeah,
That's that market plus where we were, positions and range, I think is what Paul's referring to.
yeah. So is that, you're obviously, you could be talking about the average position in band as well, which is quite important, that 2.2%, Paul, and we've kind of moved on that. I guess we were lagging behind the market, and we've been able to pull that data right across the organisation, and each of the bands across the organisation moves, and the top 3 or 4 bands, we give them a small haircut through the process to be able to allow us to redistribute that money across the bulk of the organisation, to be able to lift all of the bands, to be able to close that gap to that 0.5%. If we had applied the complete market data from Strategic Pay, carte blanche as they provided it, we wouldn't have been able to get to that position. But with the kind of, I guess, more strategic look at each of the bands across the organisation, pulling the top bands back a little bit, allowed us to redistribute that money to be able to increase the majority of the organisation to within that 0.5% of that strategic pay data.
Yeah,
Right.
and the other side of that is that where staff in the organisation were positioned in positions and range was actually below 100%. So not everybody is paid at 100%. New staff come in, they're paid at sort of 90 or so, and we have agreements to transition staff as quickly as we can. In the market when they're competent. And so as well as the whole market lifting, we have staff who are kind of moving through ranges. And once they get into the competent, it's a lot harder. I think you'll see a matrix on page 10 of the agenda, which kind of shows how it's hard if you're high in range and you're performing well, if you're meeting the market, actually advance is actually quite difficult.
That's right.
The more you're remunerated. So overall, we had staff at around about 96.5%, and we lifted them through this process. So overall, we're at about 98%, as well as the market. So that's why the market data 4% or so didn't quite.
That's right.
Next to
because that was that 2.2%. I mentioned at the start, that was that we went from a 97.8% to a 98.8%. And if we hadn't have, utilised that extra 1.1% or the 660,000, we wouldn't have been able to close that gap. And we do have agreements with our unions around, when people join us, their position in range, if they come in less than 93%, they'll have 5 years to get to 100%. And if they're at 93% or more, they'll have 3 years to get to 100% of the band. So that's actually quite an important metric for us. So it's good that we're really closing that gap quickly.
Can I just ask, there's nothing in this report on it, but just in terms of the staff retention rates, there was last meeting, there was some, might have been a meeting before, there was concern expressed about the level of retention,
Yes.
Which I didn't find as a concern at all. Has anything changed?
Yeah.
In periods,
It certainly has.
3 or 4 months?
Yeah, it has. So we're down, it was probably 17 to 19,
17%.
around that. And it's down to around 12 now, which is significantly different. But obviously the external pressures that are on people, people are staying put, and we're seen as a reasonably stable, solid employer. So that'll probably continue for the next little while until we see inflation come back a bit. Yeah.
So is that to signal to you that it's that change is centric to WRC, or is that a market centric movement?
That'll be market centric across all. I mean, I was reading last night just around our immigration stats, and we've got record numbers of people coming and going. So there's a lot of people coming in, but there's a lot of Kiwis leaving, and most of them are heading to Aussie. you know, and that's if you're a policeman, you can get 2 or 3 times the salary. The nurses are the same. You can go to the mines, you know. So a lot of our younger people are heading over that way to cash up for 5 or 6 years and then come back and look at a deposit that they wouldn't be able to do in New Zealand. But at the same time, with the gates open again, we've got lots of immigrants from all across the world coming in, which is good to be able to balance that out, because that's important.
Blame them for doing that.
You certainly can't. No, it's a tough time at the minute for a lot of people.
Through you, Chair, a couple of things that Stu and I have been talking about. One is that there's been a lot of discussion that, you know, it's the increased pressure on salaries might come off. And we haven't seen that yet. In fact, there's been some recent media stories around that. The other thing is that for some staff, especially in the policy space, which is where one of our pressure points has been, and a lot of it was driven by MEP, taking a lot of the good policy people around the country and the consultants and so on to do a lot of the legislative reform. Well, it's been high profile in the media. MFE is actually looking to reduce their staff numbers significantly and have their budgets reduced. There's kind of this expectation that staff are going to flow out. One of the issues has been that when MFE recruited these people, they were paying about a $40,000 premium to the market. And of course, some of the people who are coming out are expecting to hold that premium. And so it's probably going to take a while for the market to shake, I suppose. But we're hopeful, aren't we, Stu?
Yeah, we are. It's created some really unrealistic expectations too. There's a number of companies have offered grads coming out with no experience, sort of $80,000 a year. I mean, that is just, it's crackers. And then it's not, but that person gets into the role and they're earning that money, and after a year or so, the expectation is that they start to deliver against that salary, but they're never able to because they haven't had the year's experience to be able to do that. So it's been interesting, the kind of perverse things that has been.
They cherry-picked a lot of the staff out of private and public sector, local government included. So some of the perceived better planners are in that position. And so, it's going to be hard for them to come back into the workforce and live with it.
I just want to check, Paul, were you finished with that? Were you finished?
I do have one more question, if I may.
Yep, finished.
A number that councillors, in my experience, are often quite interested in is, Chris, and Stuart, don't know whether you've got the number at your fingertips, but you run 3 zones through your remuneration, don't you, between 85% and 115%. So you've got at the bottom a sort of a developing zone, then you've got a performing zone, and then you've got your top performers, the adding value folks. Do you have at hand the percentage of your workforce that you've got in each one of those zones? That just gives councillors a sense of, who are those who are paid well below the midpoint, and who are your stars? What percentage of people are paid at the top?
Really need to know that.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Paul, and I guess it kind of comes back to the what you mentioned earlier with that 5-tier rating scale. That's my preference as well. I guess we've been working quite hard to assess that kind of top and bottom, and you would naturally expect at the very bottom, at the very top, to see at least a sort of a 5%. The team have been working really hard on that, and we are identifying our talent. And Chris and I have kind of discussed, the potential next year to look at bonuses and stuff for that top 5, because when you start to hit that, 110, 115%, and you go through the kind of the metrics, you'll see that at the back of the paper, it shows, the performance increases as well as the market. And when you get higher, you start to not get as much of a performance increase. But when you're sitting at 115% because you're a star performer, you want to get something. So that's what we need to look at in that space. And I guess I've been working quite hard with the team to lift the performance of the bottom, and that sort of 85%, the people that aren't moving or have been identified as poor performers. And that's been going particularly well. So we're starting to see some people move on from the organisation, which is really good. So we don't have any metrics strictly around that currently, but that is something that I want to see for next year. I want us to have that, established, so we can know how many people are in that bottom tier, or maybe they have joined us and they haven't progressed through as quickly as we would have liked, and we can identify that. And the same at the top end as well. What are we doing to look after those people that are, performing really well and are at that 115%, or are performing okay, but have been here for a long time, and are at 115%. So maybe don't need the performance bit, but certainly will keep them within the market.
So can I just add to that question? In some organisations I've been in, there's been a propensity to increase salaries beyond 100%, where there's been good performance every year. I personally prefer bonuses for the first 1 or 2 years to see that it's sustained. And then once it's for 2 years, it's been sustained, or then move them permanently to that level. So what's the process here?
Yeah, so we have done that. This year we had a number of people that received the one-off bonus. And it works well. And I agree, it's good to see that sustained.
If it is sustained for a second year, what's your policy then?
Well, there's no strict policy on that, so we're just applying a kind of.
Right, so there's no automatic increase in salary just because you're improving.
No,
You'd like to see the sustained effort.
we apply the model.
Yeah.
Which basically says, depending where you are and depending what performance is, what we can do, but it's always within budget, within budget availability. So there are some staff who we only give a bonus to because there isn't enough money to go around. We've got to pick.
It's the ongoing commitment that increases the budget.
I don't think we have a current policy where we hold people on a salary and give them a bonus for 2 years as such. It's a little bit depends on each person.
Well, it's more pragmatic than I've seen in some cases. Then that's good.
Ben.
Just to comment, I agree with Chris about the 2 reports a year to give an assessment, because universities are now starting to lay off significant numbers of staff. But Ora is downsizing. National's talking about $600 million coming out of public service. There's going to be a lot more pressure when you add in immigration of 100,000 a year. The expectation shouldn't be there next year for the same as what it was. But I just wanted to ask about the $660,000 that has been managed to find in savings internally year on year from now on. Where does it come from? Because that could have been rates decreases. So.
And in a way, it's not rates increases. It's something that we're already taking. You're right, and I'm glad to see this going out of the baseline going forward. We've got to find out. I'm just looking to probably take it off the salary line. I've talked with Janine about what's the mechanism we can do that, to take it out, and then we'll just have to readjust the organisation to pull it out of other budgets if it's needed to keep the number of staff, because there's no other easy way of doing it. We've got to go into each project and work out how we're going to.
I just wondered, are there projects that are being slowed or reduced in order for you to save that 660?
It will happen. The easiest way to put it into the organisation, I think, is just across all the salary budgets, reduce it by 1.1%. And if we need to, we'll just find it from projects. We're not saying we're reducing one part of the organisation, so everybody get that 1.1%. We're yet to find it. Berlin's yet to find the mechanism, but it will be in it for this year, and it will be part of the baseline that you're seeing in the LTP budgets going forward.
But it also means that we could have a request for a rate increase, which is a good thing. But with the fat's coming out of the system, which is something I think we're all in favour of in this room, certainly the councillors. So, that the pressure needs to stay on, because the community doesn't want us to go mad.
That's precisely all I'm saying. Is that
we don't want to go from 15% staff turnover to 30%, because they're all going to somewhere more paid. But I think
you can't say that, Nog. Sometimes 30% staff turnover is actually positive rather than negative.
I'd like to
experience
comment too on particularly about what Chris said about ME. Sure. So, and referring also to a comment that Ben made about universities. So actually what happened here, Hamilton, in the same way that the regional council was poached, so was the university by MFE, and a considerable number of people took on contracts with MFE. And one of the things that attracted them too was just the opportunity to work at home and not to go in to confront the students. So having said that, and this relates to your retention rate. I would predict the retention rate is going to tighten significantly. And so several of the people already who went from the university to MFE have already been laid off. And there is nowhere to go in the university. So, there's been downsizing going on in 4 out of the 8 universities. And these people now essentially are somewhat stranded. So not only will the retention rate improve when you're hiring, you may also be able to take people on at a lower salary than you would have otherwise, because there is no possibility at the moment for most of these people of getting a job anywhere.
That was my point really, is that it's a tighter market. We should be tighter on what's offered going forward if it is tighter.
I'd just like to support what you were saying as well, and I would suggest that it's going to be March next year before you're going to see any real change, but it will hit, and it'll hit hard when it does.
Just a little anecdote heads on to that. So some of the staff who we lost and went to MFE do get to work at home. They didn't have to go move to Wellington or anywhere else. But there was a discussion, whether they might be able to come back and work in our offices, and we just put an absolute no on that at the time, because we could have seen an absolute avalanche. If you could go get $40,000 more, work in the same nice workplace and whatever. But I guess it's something around the corner that we could look at, is when all the circumstances change, whether we do start to collaborate more with some of the central government. Not while there's poaching of staff at the same time. Exacerbated it.
What we understand is they come and work in here, not from home, because they work at home, have got Zooms or whatever.
The other point that was making up the report too, because the other thing you've got to watch out for is that the reason some of these people leave and go to work at home is they're actually not great in team situations. And they're actually using this also as a device to support themselves and not considering the institution. And so again, when you're doing your interviewing, you've got to watch out for people who actually have been playing this game, because sometimes they're not the best employees to recruit, actually.
Stu, what's the program we use to track staff performance?
Info.
It is Info.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And just around the working for home, I know we had a percentage of, where are we sitting with that now?
It's probably around it'll be 60% in the office most of the time. I think that's probably where it sits. 40% at home. Yeah. And it really varies quite broadly depending on the role. A lot of people enjoy being in the office, most of the time, and maybe one day a week at home. And then there's some areas that work, and it would be a pretty small portion that would be at home more often than not. So.
And is Info picking up any discrepancies between those that performance-wise that are in the office and are at home?
Not particularly. I guess that comes back to my kind of piece around identifying who the top and bottom are.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, you can be in the office or you can be at home, but you still might not be a good performer. And it's just
I agree, and that's why I wonder
to manage and lead. So yeah.
Just a question there for you, Chris. Would your preference be, like many of the Googles and things now, to have staff in the office rather than at home? Is that if you were hiring again from new next year, would you prefer people to be in the office to start?
It's bigger font, yes and no. My preference is them to be in, because the team, the importance of teams working together to achieve outcomes and so on. But the reality is, in this world, you've got to have some degree of flexibility to attract good people. And so yes, but there's a bit of a caveat on it, really.
It's dramatically changed. If you'd have said 5 years ago that half of people would be working at home, you just wouldn't have believed it. But it doesn't even, private consultancies now are totally flexible on that. And I've a couple of friends in business in Hamilton, and they are very much of the you must be in work, and it's not particularly working well for them. They have had a reasonable turnover, and people that have said, well, I can go and work down the road and I can still have my day a week at home, and that works well for me, and I'm still productive. And it's really up to us as a leadership team to ensure that people are productive wherever they are, and that comes back to that good management leadership. And
well, it's just COVID change the world, but the world seems to be changing again. If we have a Middle East war, it's like.
It's on, it's on.
We got to that one.
People's going through the roof, everything.
Yeah.
Paul, have you got another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that there is a general pressure to return to work in the office. What the best example of that I can think of is 2020, 2021 PwC put in place just about the most flexible work policy that I've ever seen, which essentially said to every employee, you choose where you want to be today so that you can work at your best. And they got a massive flow out of the office to people working at home, creating what's described as an introvert's paradise. If you, to Bruce's point, if you don't like or you don't value social contact, you work from home, never mind the consequences for the organization. PwC, as one example, has now moved to your default position as your work in the office. So they're dragging people back in because they're becoming increasingly aware of the disadvantages of having people choose to work at home. I think the trend's reversing quite quickly.
Just like to reinforce that because I've had similar comments from other professional services firms. Professional services is a people business. People business doesn't work from home. You work in the office with other people. Just your way.
All right, any other comments on the report or questions? All right, just taking a, oh, yes.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, happy to move to accept the report.
Right, so we've got a mover and Councillor Marr, second and Councillor Hughes. All those in favor? Opposed?
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thanks, Stu.
Stu, can you just flip information on that info? I've just had a query from Corporate Council, what we're using. They're looking at putting something in place. Thank you. Cheers.
Like how we're calling.
Yeah, I've seen it. I'll flick.
Like rebranding, like we'll just forget about the nightmare that was reboot. The process. All right, okay,
Product that's used as Info Global HR though.
okay.
It is.
We'll call it by its name. Okay, we're going to move into public excluded now. So do I have a mover, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Clarkson? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Including Paul staying in the room.